ISO 14001 is the guidelines and standards for environmental management systems. This standard applies to all companies. The organizations may enhance their environmental impact and sustainability by adopting and implementing this standard. ISO 9001 is the international standard outlines for a standard quality management system. The organizations may deliver quality goods and services that fulfill the customer satisfaction. It focuses on the 7 quality management principles. ISO 45001 is the international standard that specifies particular standards for occupational health and safety management systems that assist enhance the workplace health and safety, improve the operations, and increase the business lifespan. It is relevant to all organizations in all industries.
Now I'm going to present the clause 4. The first subclause is understanding the organization and its context. Issues are those internal or external characteristics that can either positively or negatively affect the way the organization manages its EMS. Then, for the ISO 9001, organization must consider when they manage risk by establishing the context to define the internal and external factors to meet their objectives and goals. Then, the organization is required to identify all relevant internal and external issues, including conditions, characteristics, or changing circumstances that can affect its OH&S management system. Next subclause is about understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. But for ISO 45001, it also relates to the expectation of workers. For ISO 14001, it relates to EMS, while ISO 9001, there is no requirement for this ISO. For ISO 45001, it relates to OH&S management system. Next subclause is about determining the scope of each ISO. ISO 14001 relates to EMS that include all activity, product, and services of the organization. Next, the scope of QMS should be based on the nature of the organization product and their realization processes to keep up with the quality of product and services. For ISO 45001, the standard requires the scope of OH&S to potentially be widened, including how the needs of the relevant group noted above can be addressed within the OH&S management system. This subclause talks about the management system of each ISO. The organization must establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve to its EMS to improve the environmental performance. Then, the organization must establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve the QMS as per requirement of this standard. The organization must establish, implement, maintain, and continue to improve the OH&S management, including the interaction. Next clause is about the leadership, which is clause 5. The first subclause is about leadership and commitment. For ISO 14001, the top management is responsible for the effectiveness of the EMS. For the ISO 45001, the top management must be taking overall responsibility and accountability to the prevention of work-related injuries. For the ISO 9001, the general one, the top management has to demonstrate the leadership and commitment to the QMS. Then, for the customer focus, the organization has to determine the risk and opportunity that can affect the conformity of the product and services. Next subclause is about the policy. The policy for ISO 14001 is the defined scope of its EMS is appropriate to the purpose and context of the organization, including nature, scope, and environmental impacts of its activities. Then, the ISO 45001 is about the commitment to provide safe and healthy working conditions for the prevention of work-related injury and ill health. For ISO 9001, establishing the quality policy, a quality policy that is in line with the purpose and context of the organization, and communicating the quality policy. It should be applied within the organization by ensuring that it is communicated and understood within the organization. Next subclause is about organizational roles, responsibility, and authorities. So for ISO 14001, The responsibility and authority for relevant roles are assigned the responsibility and authority for ensuring that the EMS conforms the requirement of this ISO. While for the ISO 9001, assign authority and responsibility to ensure that the system conforms to the requirement of this ISO. Then, for the 45001, it also has the authorities. So the authorities and responsibility for the OHS management system are assigned and communicated at all levels. This subclass is only available for ISO 45001, consultation and participation of workers. The organization must establish and maintain processes for consultation and participation of workers at all applicable levels and function for the improvement of the OHS management system.
Let us move on to clause 6, the planning process. In point 6.1, there is this planning of actions to address risks and opportunities. ISO 401 introduces that within the scope of the MS, the organization shall determine potential emergency situations, whereas ISO 45001 shall assess the hazards and opportunities that are relevant to OSH management system. In the case of plan changes, they need to maintain documented information on risks and opportunities. Similarly, in all these ISO, the organization shall implement and maintain the previous planning processes considering the issues related in Clause 4, context of organization. Then 6.1.2 lead us to environmental aspects. ISO 1401 involve parts where organization shall consider change of parameter, emergency, communicate among levels of organization, and maintain documented information. Meanwhile, in ISO 9001, a brief plan is made on how to integrate actions into the QMS processes and evaluate the effectiveness of the action. ISO 4501 organization relates on how routine, non-routine work is organized, potential emergency, people activities in the workplace, and issues consideration of designs and installations. Additionally, it also presents us risks and opportunities where organization shall assess the effectiveness of existing controls and other risks on implementation and maintenance of the OHS management system. In 6.1.3, organization must determine the compliance obligations while continually improving its EMS. In ISO 9001, the context is unavailable, but for ISO 45001, there is 6.1.3, determination of legal where they have access to legal requirements, communication need on legal aspect applicable to its hazard, OHS management system. 6.1.4 planning action is to take actions on significant environmental aspects and compliance obligations, where both have same traits except ISO 901, which is to act implementing actions, evaluate the effectiveness, and be prepared to emergency situations. In 6.2, ISO 1401 and 901 is a similar 6.2.1 environmental objective where organization establish quality objective at relevant functions needed for QMS. Then ISO 451 is to be consistent OHS policy. All three exhibit similar clause but 6.2 by determining what will be done, who is responsible, resources, and result evaluation. But for ISO 451, there's addition on how the action to achieve OHS objective will be integrated into the business processes. Lastly, 6.3 Planning of changes exists only in ISO 901 when there is need for change for purposes and availability of resource as well as allocation of the responsibility and authorities within Q quality management system.
For clause 7.1, which is resources, the three ISO have similar resources, which is the organizations provides the assistance and the resources for the ongoing improvement. Clause 7.2 is competence. The three ISO have two similarities. The first one is the organization must determine the required competence of any persons performing work under its control that has an impact on the performance. The second one is the documentation of the information is required. For clause 7.3, which is awareness, for this clause, the three ISO have one similarity and one difference. For similarity, they are aware of their contribution to the efficiency of the quality management system as well as the advantages of the better performance. For difference, only at ISO 45001 which is aware of relevant hazard, risks, and actions. Clause 7.4, which is communication. This clause only available for ISO 9001. The internal and external communications related to the quality management systems must be determined. Clause 7.5, which is documented information, the three I's all have similarities in Clause 7.5.1, general. The first one, the organization's quality management system must include information must be documented. Next, documented information considered necessary by the organizations. For Clause 7.5.2, creating and updating, the three ISO also have similarities in this clause, which is shall ensure appropriate identification and description, format, review and approval for suitability and adequacy. The last clause, which is 7.5.3, control and documented information. This clause only available for ISO 14001 and ISO 45001. There are two in this clause. The first one shall be controlled to ensure it is available and suitable for use where and when it is needed, adequately protected. Next, shall address following activities as applicable: distribution, access, retrieval and use, storage and preservation, control of changes, and the last one is retention and disposition.
Clause 8 Operation 8.1 Operational Planning and Control. For ISO 14001-2015, the organization shall establish, implement, control, and maintain the processes needed to meet environmental management system requirements and to implement the actions identified in 6.1 and 6.2 by establishing operating criteria for the process, implementing control of the process in accordance with the operating criteria. The organization shall control plan changes and review the consequences of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate any adverse effects as necessary. For ISO 9001-2015, the organization shall plan, implement, and control the processes needed to meet the requirements for the provision of products and services, and to implement the actions determined in Clause 6 by determining the requirements for the products and services. The organization shall control plan changes and review the consequences of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate any adverse effect as necessary. For ISO 45001-2018, meet the requirements of the OH&S management system and to implement actions determined in Clause 6. Any requirements for risk assessment, operational control should be determined in form of timely and regular fashion, and that actions and outputs from these functions are undertaken in the correct manner to ensure your system yields the improvement it needs. Next is 8.2 Emergency Preparedness and Response. For ISO 14001, the organization shall prepare to respond by planning actions to prevent or mitigate adverse environmental impacts from emergency situations. For ISO 45001-2018, establish a planned response to emergency situations, including the provisions of first aid. Plan for unexpected events such as identification of hazard, highlight the potential emergency with possible consequences. 3 of ISO are focusing on improving the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness in management system in their own section in order to satisfy with ISO standards. It is an ongoing process that entails preparation, performance, supervision, and problem solving. The improvement is generally predicated on the idea that few continuing and well-calculated modifications can result in significant advancement over time. Next is 9.1 Performance Evaluation, Monitoring, Measurement, Analysis, and Evaluations. For ISO 14001, the organization shall monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate its environmental performance, and the organization shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation results. For ISO 9001, the organization shall evaluate the performance and the effectiveness of the quality management system, and the organization shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the results. As for ISO 45001, establish, implement, and maintain processes for monitoring, measuring, analysis, and performance evaluations, and retain documented information as evidence of the result of monitoring, measurement, analysis, and performance evaluation, and on the maintenance, calibration, or verification of measuring equipment. Next is 9.2 Internal Audit. For ISO 14001, the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on weather environmental management system. And for ISO 9001, the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the quality management system. For ISO 45001, conduct internal audits at planned intervals that provide information on whether OH&S management system is conforming to the organization's own requirements for its OH&S management system, including OH&S objective and to the requirements of the ISO 45001. Next is Internal Audit Program. For ISO 14001, the organization shall define the audit criteria and scope for each audit and ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management. For ISO 9001, the organization shall define the audit criteria and scope for each audit and to ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management. And for ISO 45001, ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management.
Okay, next we are moving on to the clause 10, which is about improvement. In this class, we will talking about 10.1, which is about general, 10.2 about non-conformity and corrective action, and 10.3, which is about continual improvement. Generally, for ISO 14001, it is to determine the opportunities for improvement and implement the necessary action to achieve intended outcome of its EMS. For ISO 9001, it is to determine and select the opportunity for improvement and implement any necessary action to meet the customer requirement and satisfaction. And for ISO 45001 is to determine the opportunities for improvement and implement necessary action to achieve the intended outcome of its OH&S management system. Okay, for 10.2, ISO 14001 and ISO 9001 is quite similar, but the difference is in ISO 14001, when a non-conformity occurs, the organization shall make changes to the environmental management system, while for ISO 9001, when a conformity occurs, including any arising from complaints, the organization shall update risks and opportunities determined during the planning. While for ISO 45001, which is quite special, which is including incident, non-conformity, and corrective action. Okay, when an incident or non-conformity occurs, the organization shall review existing assessment of OH&S risks and other risks. For 10.3, which is about continual improvement, in ISO 40001 is focusing on enhancing environment performance. And in ISO 9001, which is the continual improvement, is focusing in consider the result of analysis and evaluation and the outputs for management review. And for ISO 45001, the continual improvement is focusing in enhancing OH&S performance, promoting culture to support OH&S management, promoting the participation of workers, and maintaining and retaining documented information as evidence.
In conclusion, integrations of different contexts in ISO systems could minimize inefficiency for greater growth of the system. Besides, standardizations and application of ISO among organizations such as airports, constructions, manufacturing, community services, and many more have contributed towards breakthrough improvement of the company's quality and management and environmental aspects. That's all from us. Thank you very much.